Show me, Lord, show me the way. Lord, I need you to show. Please, Jesus, show me the way. Because I'm down here, Lord, and I need your awesome power to show me the way. Lord, I'm your child, Lord, and I need you, Father.
Good morning, good morning, good morning. Welcome again to our Wednesday Bible study. We've been studying in a series of lessons on the life of David, King of the Jews. We've been looking at the things that produced this great man after God's own heart. We've seen the product, and we're now examining the process. Now, in our previous lesson called Adversity 2, David had a chance to kill Saul, but would not harm the Lord's anointed. He did not go fleshly and say, you tried to kill me, now I'm going to kill you. He was about doing God's will. And when he faced adversity, he blessed the Lord. He prayed. He trusted in the Lord. And he showed mercy to his adversary. And as I said in previous times, we need to examine and identify the lessons that we can use. It's not good enough just to know what David did, but we need to take away something that we could use in our Christian growth. And these things will help us when we meet adversity. Right now we're in 1 Samuel chapter 25. And Samuel died, and all the Israelites were gathered together and lamented him and buried him in his house at Ramah. And David arose and went down to the wilderness of Paran, and there was a man in Maon whose possessions were in Carmel, and the man was very great. And he had 3,000 sheep and 1,000 goats, and he was shearing his sheep in Carmel. Now the name of the man was Nabal, and the name of his wife Abigail. And she was a woman of good understanding and of a beautiful countenance. But the man was churlish and evil in his doings, and he was of the house of Caleb. And David heard in the wilderness that Nabal did shear his sheep. And David sent out 10 young men, and David said unto the young men, get you up to Carmel, and go to Nabal, and greet him in my name. And thus shall ye say to him that liveth in prosperity, peace be both to thee, and peace be to thine house, and peace be unto all that thou hast. And I have heard that thou hast shearers. Now thy shepherds which were with us, we hurt them not, neither was there aught missing unto them all the while they were in Carmel. Ask thy young men, and they will show thee. Wherefore let the young men find favor in thine eyes, for we come in a good day. Give, I pray thee, whatsoever cometh to thine hand unto thy servants and to thy son David. And when David's young men came, they spoke to Nabal according to all those words in the name of David, and ceased. And Nabal answered David's servants and said, who is David? And who is the son of Jesse? There be many servants nowadays that break away every man from his master. Shall I then take my bread and my water and my flesh that I have killed for my shearers, and give it unto men whom I know not whence they be? So David's young men turned their way and went again, and came and told him all those things. And David said unto his men, gird ye on every man his sword. And they girded on every man his sword, and David also girded on his sword. And there went up after David about 400 men, and 200 abode by the stuff. But one of the young men told Abigail, Nabal's wife, saying, Behold, David sent messengers out of the wilderness to salute our master, and he railed on them. But the men were very good unto us, and we were not hurt, neither missed we anything, as long as we were conversant with them when we were in the fields. But they were a wall unto us, both by night and day, all the while we were with them keeping the sheep. Now, therefore, know and consider what thou wilt do. For evil is determined against our master and against all his household, for he is such a son of Belial that a man cannot speak to him. Then Abigail made haste and took 200 loaves and 2 bottles of wine and 5 sheep ready dressed, and 5 measures of parched corn and 100 clusters of raisins and 200 cakes of figs, and laid them on asses. She said unto her servants, Go on before me. Behold, I come after you. But she told not her husband Nabal. And it was so, as she rode on the ass, that she came down by the covert of the hill. And behold, David and his men came down against her, and she met them. Now David had said, Surely in vain have I kept all that this fellow hath in the wilderness, so that nothing was missed of all that pertained unto him. And he hath requited me evil for good. So and more also do God unto the enemies of David, if I leave of all that pertain to him by the morning light any that pisseth against the wall. And when Abigail saw David, she hasted and lighted off the ass, and fell before David on her face, and bowed herself to the ground, and fell at his feet, and said, Upon me, my Lord, upon me, let this iniquity be. And let thine handmaid, I pray thee, speak in thine audience, and hear the words of thine handmaid. Let not my Lord, I pray thee, regard this man of Belial, even Nabal, for as his name is, so is he. Nabal is his name, and folly is with him. But I, thine handmaiden, saw not the young men of my Lord whom thou didst send. Now therefore, my Lord, as Jehovah liveth, and as thy soul liveth, seeing the Lord hath withholden thee from coming to shed blood, and from avenging thyself with thine own hand, now let thine enemies and they that seek evil to my Lord be as Nabal. And now this blessing which thine handmaid hath brought unto my Lord, let it even be given unto the young men that follow my Lord. I pray thee, forgive the trespass of thine handmaid, for Jehovah will certainly make my Lord a sure house, because my Lord fighteth the battles of Jehovah, and evil hath not been found in thee all thy days. Yet a man is risen to pursue thee, and to seek thy soul. But the soul of my Lord shall be bound in the bundle of life with Jehovah thy God. And the soul of thine enemies, them shall he sling out, as out of the middle of a sling. And it shall come to pass, when Jehovah shall have done to my Lord according to all the good that he has spoken concerning thee, and shall have appointed thee ruler over Israel, that this shall be no grief unto thee, nor offense of heart unto my Lord, either that thou hast shed blood careless, or that my Lord hath avenged himself. But when Jehovah shall have dealt well with my Lord, then remember thine handmaiden. Okay. The text begins with the death of Samuel. Samuel was David's connection with God. Samuel anointed him. He ran to be with Samuel when he escaped out of the window from Saul. It's interesting to note that we see restraint from David while Samuel is alive. Now he's tempted to be vengeful. What does that say about our connection with God? It tells me that if we lose our connection with God, we're liable to do some of anything. Look at what verse 29 says. 1 Samuel chapter 25. Yet a man is risen to pursue thee and to seek thy soul. This is Abigail speaking to David. But the soul of my Lord shall be bound in the bundle of life with Jehovah thy God. And the souls of thine enemies, them shall he sling out as out of the middle of a sling. That's why I titled this lesson, Bundles and Slings. Bound in the bundle of life with Jehovah thy God. This phrase signifies the protective providence of God. David is being pursued by Saul. His life is in danger. He fights the Philistines. And again, his life is in danger. People he has helped turn him into Saul. Say, that's where David is. His life is constantly in danger, but he is bound in the bundle of life with Jehovah thy God. I just love that phrase. I love the imagery that it brings. He needs the protective providence of God, and he has it. Now, what Abigail is giving is a blessing to David. She's humble, apologetic, respectful, and speaks gentle words to turn away his wrath. She counts on his mercy and desire not to shed blood in vengeance. Now, up until now, all we've seen is blood being shed in battle with the enemies of Israel. He would not shed Saul's blood, and Saul was trying to kill him. She pleads for her husband's life and all the innocent men in their household. She also warns David not to have this hanging over his head when God finally raises him to the throne. She knew David was the next king in Israel. She also knew that it was against God's will for him to shed blood in anger because of vengeance. Remember, later God would say, vengeance is mine, I will repay, saith the Lord. And we need to bear that in mind, because too many times the natural man in us, the fleshly man, wants us to get folk back, pay them back for what they did to us. But we need to remember that vengeance belongs to the Lord. So she blesses David and said, your soul will be bound in the bundle of life with Jehovah thy God. But then she talks about the enemies and puts a curse on them. They will be he will sling them out out of the middle of a sling. The opposite of the blessing for David is a curse for all his enemies. David admits that he had been kept from vengeance by God, sending Abigail to him. Verse 34 of 1 Samuel 25. For in very deed, as Jehovah God of Israel liveth, which had kept me back from hurting thee, except thou had hastened to come to meet me, surely there had not been left unto Nabal by the morning light any that pisseth against the wall. So instead of being bound or kept, she wishes that his enemies be cast out, unprotected by the power of God, unaided by the providence of God. The imagery is vivid and descriptive and leaves no doubt as to which state is better. Which would you rather be? Bound in the bundle or slung out like a sling? Verse 32. And David said to Abigail, blessed be Jehovah God of Israel, which sent thee this day to meet me. And blessed be thy advice, and blessed be thou which hast kept me this day from coming to shed blood and from avenging myself with my own hand. David realized he was about to make a big mistake, and he thanks her for coming. He thanks her for God sending her to him. He said, for in very deed, as Jehovah God of Israel liveth, which hath kept me back from hurting thee, except thou hast hasted and come to meet me, surely there had not been left under the ball by the morning light any that pisseth against the wall. David was going to kill all of Nabal's men, servants, all those that are males. Verse 35. So David received of her hand that which she had brought him, and said unto her, go in peace to thy house. See, I have hearkened to thy voice, and have accepted thy person. And Abigail came to Nabal, and behold, he held a feast in his house, like the feast of a king. And Nabal's heart was merry within him, for he was very drunken. Wherefore she told him nothing, less or more, until the morning light. But when it came to pass in the morning, when the wine was gone out of Nabal, and his wife had told him these things, that his heart died within him, and he became as a stone. He didn't realize how close to being utterly destroyed he had come, because he spoke those words to David's servants that showed ingratitude and anger. Verse 38. And it came to pass about 10 days after that the Lord smote Nabal, that he died. When David heard that Nabal was dead, he said, Blessed be Jehovah that hath pleaded the cause of my reproach from the hand of Nabal, and hath kept his servant from evil. For Jehovah had returned the wickedness of Nabal upon his own head. And David sent and communed with Abigail to take her to him to wife. David realizes God was the one that fought this battle. If I had taken it in my own hands, I would have made a grave error. I wonder how many times can we look back on situations that we took in our own hands and messed it up even worse, instead of turning it over to God. So now, Nabal is dead, and David sends to Abigail and talks with her about becoming his wife. Verse 40. And when the servants of David were come to Abigail to Carmel, they spake unto her, saying, David sent us unto thee, to take thee to him to wife. And she arose and bowed herself on her face to the earth, and said, Behold, let thy handmaid be a servant to wash the feet of the servants of my Lord. And Abigail hasted and arose, and rode upon an ass, with 5 damsels of her that went after her. And she went after the messengers of David, and became his wife. David also took Ahinoam of Jezreel, and they were also both of them his wives. But Saul had given Michal his daughter, David's wife, to Phalti, the son of Laish, which was of Gallim. All right, so let's look at the characters here. Abigail is wise and humble and seeks peace and is respectful to her husband. The only reason she went to David was to save his life, and to save the household. Look at Nabal. He's rude, mean, suspicious, disrespectful, ungrateful, and selfish. Now, the two characters, as you just read this on the surface, which would you rather be? While we can see some good things about the character of David, we also see some not so good things. David is tempted to violence. He's vengeful toward Nabal and all his house, but he's compassionate toward Abigail and grateful to God. But God is the one that helped David. And it's good to see, even in spite of the fact that Samuel is dead. 1 Samuel 25, verse 39. And when David heard that Nabal was dead, he said, Blessed be Jehovah, that hath pleaded the cause of my reproach from the hand of Nabal, and hath kept his servant from evil. Listen to these words. David said, God was the one that took up my cause and kept me from doing evil. Oh, I thank God for the times that he kept me from doing evil. For Jehovah hath returned the wickedness of Nabal upon his own head. Do you think we get the Lord's help when we're about to do the wrong thing? I sure hope we do. I hope we get his help to restrain us, to keep us from doing the wrong thing. And here's another component of what made David the greatest king in Israel. Remember what was written in 1 Samuel chapter 13. And Samuel said to Saul, Thou hast done foolishness. Thou hast not kept the commandment of Jehovah thy God, which he commanded thee. For now would Jehovah have established thy kingdom upon Israel forever. Here's what Saul didn't do. He did not keep God's commandment. But here's what David is doing. He's keeping God's commandment. So because Saul wouldn't, verse 14, but now thy kingdom shall not continue, and Jehovah has sought him a man after his own heart. And Jehovah had commanded him to be captain over his people, because thou hast not kept that which Jehovah commanded thee. Listen, people, it's always a punishment when we don't do what God said do. God is looking for servants who will seek his heart or seek the ways of God. So let's review what we know about this man after God's own heart. David is courageous. He trusts God. He honors and blesses God. He behaved wisely even when he was envied by Saul. He was a true friend to Jonathan. Sadly, David is also tempted, vengeful towards Nabal and all his house, prone to lie when it suits him. But we've seen in his writings in the Psalms, he doesn't want to be that way. So he asked God to remove that lying tongue from him. In spite of all his faults, God still helps David. And in spite of ours, he'll help you too. We hope these lessons have been informative to you. I hope you have been able to find some items and some tools that you can take from these lessons and use in your daily life. We all desire to be the man or the woman after God's own heart. Join us next week as we continue in our study. Next week, we will be looking at 1 Samuel chapters 26 through 28. Read ahead and see some of these things in David's life that made him who he ultimately became. We ask that you would share these lessons. Send them to your friends and acquaintances. Let them know you can learn a little bit about the Word of God. Help us to continue to spread God's Word throughout the land. Until next time, we always pray that you be careful and be prayerful. God bless you.
Show me, Lord, show me the way. Lord, I need you to show. Please, Jesus, show me the way. Because I'm down here, Lord, and I need your awesome power to show me the way. Lord, I'm your child, Lord, and I need you.